"You don't belong here. Out, now." The words cracked across the municipal lobby like a baton striking stone. Harold Bennett stood in line with a small manila envelope pressed flat against his chest, fingers whitening along the crease. The cop's finger hovered inches from his face, the nail trimmed neat, the knuckle pale with pressure. Fluorescent lights hummed. A vending machine rattled a can somewhere in its belly. The smell of stale coffee and wet wool mixed with floor cleaner. A child paused mid-sip of a juice box, eyes wide. A woman's hand tightened around her tote until the strap squeaked. Harold's breath came slow through his nose. He adjusted the brim of his cap, not defiant, just careful, as if not to spill something invisible. "I have an appointment," he said, voice even. "Move, now!" The cop's palm slapped the counter once, flat, loud, the sound spreading through the room until it seemed to live in the walls. Harold did not step back. The envelope shook once, then stilled against his coat. Through the glass doors behind them, daylight brightened on polished brass and dark blue. 3 Marines in dress blues had stopped just outside, their reflections doubling in the glass. No one inside had turned yet, but their shadows stretched across the entry tile, long, precise, and closing the distance. If you believe every veteran deserves respect, subscribe, because every view helps this message reach those who need it most. The day had started before the sun. Harold Bennett rose from bed with the same deliberate motion he had learned in barracks decades earlier, swinging his legs over the side, pausing to let the stiffness work its way out of his knees before standing. The house was quiet, its creaks and sighs familiar companions. In the kitchen, he set water to boil for oatmeal. The ticking of the kettle and the low hum of the refrigerator were the only sounds. On the counter sat a small wooden box, the brass latch freshly polished just the night before. Inside, nestled in felt, were the ribbons and medals earned over 2 decades in the United States Army. He touched the box lightly with 2 fingers, then turned back to the stove. While the oats simmered, Harold slipped the blood pressure cuff around his arm. The Velcro hissed in the stillness. He noted the reading in his pocket notebook, just as he had every morning for the past 3 years, a quiet ritual of discipline and care. By the time the first rays of sun reached the kitchen table, Harold had eaten, washed his dish, and laced up his polished black shoes. His cap rested by the door, the same one he wore on walks to the park. He paused there now, drawing in the familiar scent of morning air, cool, faintly metallic after a light overnight rain. The park path glistened, and leaves hung heavy with droplets. Harold tipped his cap to a woman jogging past, but she did not meet his eyes. Her ponytail swayed in rhythm as she passed close enough that the scent of shampoo drifted back to him. Further along, the deep rumble of a bus engine grew near. Harold lifted his hand slightly, stepping toward the curb, but the bus doors hissed shut before he reached them. The driver's eyes were fixed ahead as the bus pulled away, leaving only the low growl of its exhaust behind. At the small corner store, Harold asked for change in smaller bills, 5 ones instead of a single $5 note. The young clerk rolled his eyes, exhaling sharply before opening the till with a metallic clack. The bills slapped onto the counter, corners misaligned, the sound flat and unkind. By mid-morning, Harold was home again, the manila envelope placed on the table. Inside was the paperwork for a property tax exemption, something he had qualified for years ago but never claimed. A friend from the park had convinced him it was time. The trip to the municipal building had been on Harold's mind all week, not from dread, but from a quiet sense of purpose. He put on his jacket, slid the envelope inside, and stepped out once more, the air now warmer, the sun bright enough to glint off the wet pavement. Ahead lay the municipal building with its stone facade and tall glass doors. He imagined it as just another errand, one of many small duties that kept a man's affairs in order. He did not imagine the voice that would greet him there, or the way the air inside would change in an instant. The municipal building lobby was cooler than the street outside, its high ceiling trapping the faint scent of disinfectant over stale coffee. A vending machine stood in the corner, its light casting a pale blue glow over a row of plastic chairs. The steady click of heels and the shuffle of paperwork filled the air in a rhythm as predictable as the clock mounted above the counter. A row of plastic chairs lined one wall, their faded blue seats worn smooth by years of restless visitors. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee from a vending machine in the corner, its motor humming in tired protest. On the far wall, behind a glass display, hung a collage of old photographs, ribbon cuttings from decades past, a grainy black and white of the town square in the 1940s, and a curled recruitment poster urging young men to serve with honor. A young mother sat near the entrance, rocking a stroller gently with her foot as she scrolled through her phone. Across from her, an older couple held hands in silence, their eyes following the minute hand on a clock above the counter. A man in a work jacket flipped through a newspaper, the rustle of its pages mingling with the hollow sound of footsteps on stone tile. Harold took in these details the way a man does who has learned to notice everything, even in ordinary places, perhaps especially in ordinary places. Harold joined the line, taking his place behind a man in a brown windbreaker and ahead of a woman scrolling on her phone. The envelope felt solid beneath his arm, the corners just beginning to soften with the warmth of his hand. The officer appeared from the side hallway, his boots striking the tile with quick, clipped steps. He was younger, perhaps mid-30s, broad-shouldered, his badge catching the light with each movement. His gaze scanned the line, stopping abruptly on Harold. "You don't belong here." His voice cut across the room, carrying over the low murmur of conversation. Heads turned. The words carried across the lobby, sharp and metallic, bouncing off the marble floor so that even those at the far end of the hall could hear. The officer didn't just stop at the accusation. He took a step closer, closing the space until Harold could feel the edge of his badge just within his peripheral vision. His voice dropped low enough for only Harold to hear, yet laced with the same authority meant to intimidate. "Move along before I make you." Then, as if the first pass wasn't enough, he circled back after glancing toward the reception desk, planting himself once more in Harold's path. He tilted his head, exaggerating the slow, uneven pace of Harold's walk, letting each mocking step land heavy and deliberate on the tile. A smirk tugged at his mouth, the kind of grin that dared anyone in the room to object. Harold said nothing, but the muscles in his jaw tensed as he gripped the manila envelope tighter. Harold straightened, though not much taller than he had been before. "I have an appointment," he said evenly. The officer closed the distance, stepping into Harold's space. The faint scent of aftershave mixed with the metallic tang of his radio microphone. "Out! Now!" His words struck like small hammer blows, deliberate and unrelenting. A man further down the line frowned. "Hey, he was here before me." The officer turned his head sharply toward the speaker. "Mind your own business," the words snapped, shutting down any further protest. Harold kept his eyes forward, focusing on the counter beyond the officer. He could see the clerk now, a young woman in a neat blouse, glancing nervously toward the confrontation. When Harold stepped forward to speak to her, she lifted a hand. "Sir, could you please step aside so we can help the next person?" The line shifted as if on cue, people shuffling forward to fill the space. Harold found himself moved to the edge of the counter, the officer still beside him, the air heavy with unspoken judgment. Someone coughed into their sleeve. A chair creaked as an older man in the waiting area leaned forward, watching with a mixture of curiosity and unease. The fluorescent lights hummed on. Harold's grip on the envelope tightened. He felt the edge press into his palm, a small reminder of the purpose that had brought him here. But above that, louder now, was the steady rhythm of the officer's breathing beside him, each inhale and exhale marking the slow climb of tension. Then came the sound, faint at first, of synchronized steps on the walkway outside. 3 sets, even and deliberate, drawing closer to the glass doors. The officer's palm hit the counter again, a sharp slap that echoed through the lobby. For Harold, the sound didn't stop at the walls. It carried him somewhere else entirely, its echo blending with the hollow thump of artillery in a place far from cool tile and stale coffee. In his mind, The air was thick with heat and the sweet rot of jungle decay. The sky above was swallowed by a green canopy. Sunlight filtered into thin shafts that barely touched the ground. Every breath carried the taste of gunpowder, and every movement was met by the constant hum of insects. It was Vietnam, 1968. Before the firefight reached its peak, the days had been an endurance test of their own. Rations went damp inside their packs, the rice clumping into hard, cold knots. Canteens sweated in the heat, the water tasting faintly of metal. The men rotated their boots near small, smoldering fires at night to dry them out, a losing battle against the constant damp. The smell of mildew clung to their uniforms as stubbornly as the red clay to their knees. Letters from home were folded and refolded until the creases felt ready to give way, paper soft from too many readings. The jungle pressed in on every side, a wall of green that trapped the heat and muffled distant movement. Sweat pooled beneath their helmets, trickling down into their eyes, and every breath felt thick enough to chew. Somewhere ahead, unseen in the trees, the enemy waited, patient, silent, and deadly. The air carried the mingled scents of wet earth and the metallic tang of old gunfire, a smell Harold knew would never leave him. Harold lay prone along the tree line, the rifle stock pressed to his shoulder, sweat running in slow rivulets down his neck. The air was alive with the crack of sniper fire, sharp, distant, and unrelenting. His unit had been pinned for hours, caught in a stretch of ground too open to cross yet too exposed to stay. Beside him was Corporal James Mercer, Jimmy, 19 years old and fresh from basic training, all nervous smiles and restless hands. Jimmy's breath came quick, his eyes darting between the tree line and the folded photograph he kept tucked into his breast pocket. It was a picture of a baby boy, barely able to sit up, eyes wide and curious. Jimmy had shown it to Harold the night before, his voice catching when he described the first smile he had ever seen from his son. A shot rang out, and Jimmy jerked, the photograph slipping from his fingers. He cried out, clutching his shoulder, his rifle clattering into the dirt. Blood seeped quickly through the olive drab of his shirt, dark and hot. Harold didn't think. He slid his rifle onto his back and grabbed Jimmy under the arm. The mud sucked at their knees as they moved, tangled roots catching at their boots. Each foot gained was a fight. The clank of Harold's gear against his body, the sting of shrapnel as a mortar blast struck nearby, sending dirt and metal raining down. A piece caught him in the arm, hot and sharp, tearing through muscle. The blast left his ears ringing, a hollow, high-pitched note that dulled the world to a muffled blur. He could see Jimmy's mouth open in pain, but the sound came to him as though through water. The ground heaved under another distant detonation, sending vibrations up through Harold's arms as he gripped tighter, hauling Jimmy inch by inch. Every root felt like a tripwire, every shadow a threat. Mud sucked at his boots, and the weight of Jimmy's gear dragged them both down. His own breath came in short bursts, steam rising in the humid air. Twice Harold's knee buckled under the strain, but he drove forward, teeth clenched, tasting sweat and iron. The jungle floor was littered with abandoned helmets, ration tins, and the jagged remnants of shattered trees, each one a reminder of how quickly a man could disappear here. The enemy's fire came in bursts now, deliberate and probing, searching for movement. Harold angled his body between Jimmy and the gunfire, feeling the sharp tug in his wounded arm each time he pulled. He did not think about how far they had left to go. He thought only of the next push, the next lurch forward, until safety was more than just a word in his head. He bit down on a copper taste in his mouth, forcing himself onward. The jungle seemed to close in, the air pressing against them with the weight of a living thing. Jimmy's breath was shallow, his eyes half closed now, but Harold kept moving, dragging him toward the makeshift cover of a cratered trench where medics crouched, waving them in. As Harold pushed Jimmy into waiting arms, another round cracked overhead, splintering the bark of a tree behind them. He ignored it, kneeling until the medics confirmed Jimmy was breathing. Only then did Harold register the ache in his own limbs, the slow, steady trickle of blood down his sleeve. Jimmy would survive. Months later, Harold would receive a letter from him. A photograph of the baby boy now walking. The note scrawled simply, "He's safe because of you." The jungle dissolved, replaced by the sterile white of the municipal lobby. Harold stood again, the envelope still in his hand, the officer still beside him. But through the glass doors now, the three Marines had entered, their boots striking the floor in unison. The glass doors swung open with a faint hiss of hydraulics, letting in a wash of cool air from the street. Three Marines stepped inside, their uniforms immaculate, brass catching the fluorescent light. Their boots struck the tile in coordinated steps. Click, click, click. A sound that seemed louder than the hum of vending machines or the shuffle of papers at the clerk's desk. Sunlight poured in behind them, outlining their figures in a sharp, almost blinding silhouette for a heartbeat, before the doors swung shut. The air in the lobby seemed to shift, quieter, heavier, as the steady cadence of their steps drew closer. The sound was precise, each strike of leather on stone perfectly aligned, as if the rhythm itself carried weight. A woman holding a paper coffee cup paused mid-sip. A child in a stroller twisted in his seat to stare. Even the vending machine's hum felt muted in the moment. The officer's eyes flickered toward them, his voice trailing off as if the sight alone had interrupted the script he'd been running in his head. The tallest Marine's gaze locked on him for just a second, unblinking, steady, before settling on Harold. The two Marines flanking him shifted slightly, hands relaxed but ready, their posture an unspoken message. They were here for a reason, and nothing in the room could move them from it. They did not speak. They did not need to. Heads began to turn, conversations pausing mid-sentence. A man flipping through a newspaper let it fall into his lap. The young mother in the corner bounced her baby slower, her gaze fixed on the new arrivals. Even the vending machine's motor seemed to quiet. Harold noticed them only when they were halfway across the lobby, their formation deliberate, eyes locked forward. The tallest Marine's gaze cut toward the scene at the counter, taking in Harold's weathered face, the steady grip on the manila envelope, and the officer standing a half-step too close. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The officer, mid-complaint, faltered as the trio stopped a few feet behind Harold. He glanced over his shoulder, his voice catching in his throat, but no greeting came. The tallest Marine stepped forward, his shadow falling across both Harold and the officer. His voice, when it came, was calm, but resonant enough to carry across the lobby. "This man is Staff Sergeant Harold Bennett." The name seemed to hang in the air, pulling every ear toward it. The Marine's eyes never left Harold's. 2 tours in Vietnam, Bronze Star, pulled a 19-year-old corporal out from under sniper fire with a mortar wound in his own arm. His actions saved lives that day, and many more after. The second Marine spoke then, his voice quieter, but no less firm. His unit called him the Anchor, because in every fight, every patrol, he held the line. The third added, "The man you see before you has more years of honorable service than most of us have years alive." The room shifted. Men straightened unconsciously. A hat was removed. Somewhere, a throat was cleared. The clerk who had told Harold to step aside looked down at her hands. Harold's gaze dropped for a moment, the corner of his mouth tightening, not from shame, but from the weight of memories pressing against the present. The tallest Marine took one more step forward, heels clicking into place. Without a word, he brought his right hand up in a crisp, deliberate salute. The other two followed instantly, boots aligned, fingers slicing the air in perfect unison. The motion was so sharp it seemed to cut through the tension still clinging to the lobby. Silence. It was not the awkward kind, but the kind that commands attention, where even the smallest sound, the faint hum of the lights, the shuffle of a foot, feels loud. One by one, the civilians began to react. A man in work overalls removed his cap and held it against his chest. The young mother adjusted her baby and stood taller. The older gentleman near the window straightened his spine as though he too was back in uniform. The officer, once so loud, lowered his gaze and took half a step back. Harold looked from one Marine to the next. His shoulders squared slowly, as though each vertebra remembered what it meant to stand at attention. He raised his right hand, slower than in his younger days, but without tremor, and returned the salute. It was not just a gesture. It was an unspoken bridge between decades, between men who had worn the same uniform under different skies. For a long moment, they held it. The weight of respect passed in silence, heavy yet steady, until the tallest Marine lowered his hand. The others followed. A few claps began in the back. They were soft at first, hesitant, but grew, not into a raucous cheer, but into a steady, respectful rhythm. Heads bowed slightly. Conversations did not resume. The air in the lobby felt different now, lighter, yet charged with the quiet electricity of recognition long overdue. Harold exhaled, the corner of his mouth curling just enough to hint at a smile. He held the moment in his chest, not rushing it, because moments like this were rare. The Marines did not linger. After a final nod to Harold, they stepped back in formation and remained silent, letting the room adjust to what had just happened. It was the building's director who moved first. She came from behind the counter, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes fixed on Harold. "Mr. Bennett," she said quietly, "I am deeply sorry for what happened here today." The officer shifted uncomfortably, his face coloring. She didn't look at him yet. Her focus stayed on Harold. "This lobby will display a veteran's code of respect from now on. Every staff member and officer in this building will know it by heart." Harold gave a single nod, neither bitter nor boastful. "Thank you," he said. By the next week, a framed document hung near the front doors, beneath the American flag. The words were plain, but they carried weight. All who served are to be treated with dignity, without exception. A local reporter came to photograph Harold standing beneath it, the 3 Marines beside him. The article ran on the front page of the community section, the headline simple, "Respect Restored." The officer who had barked him out that morning was seen weeks later at the town's Veterans Day ceremony. He stood at the back, away from the crowd, his hands clasped behind him. He did not speak to Harold. He did not need to. The way his gaze lingered on the flag spoke enough. The town, in small but lasting ways, began to remember. By the time Harold left the municipal building, the sun was sinking low, painting the town in a soft, amber light. The air carried the scent of dry leaves and wood smoke from a nearby chimney. His steps were slow, not from fatigue, but because there was no need to rush. The small wooden box of medals rested under his arm, its brass latch catching the last of the daylight. As he passed the park, the sound of children laughing reached him. A boy in a red jacket tossed a baseball to his father, the ball arcing high against the pale sky. Harold paused by the fence, watching for a moment longer than he meant to. He made his way to the bench nearest the flagpole. The flag rippled gently, each fold catching the fading light. He took off his cap, held it in his lap, and let the cool breeze touch his face. He thought about the Marines' salutes, the stillness of the lobby, and the sudden quiet after the clapping had faded. It had been years since he had felt seen in that way, not as an old man in line, but as a soldier who had given what he could. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long across the grass. Harold placed his cap back on, rose slowly from the bench, and started home. Behind him, the flag kept moving in the breeze, steady and sure. If stories like this resonate with your heart, like and subscribe for more untold moments of honor and kindness. Let us know where you are watching from, and if this moment brought back memories you carry with you. The best way to honor their memory is to keep listening. Click on the suggested video now, and we will walk together through another untold chapter of courage and sacrifice.